Nova gender. A gender experience too hard to read, process, understand, or too complex to pin down in one word. Nubila gender? A term to describe when part of one's gender is undefinable. Null gender, being without gender, but it is not a gender or neutros. Nyctogender, a gender consisting of darkness. Orbugender, a gender which is overwhelming and suffocating. Obgender, a gender that is most closely represented by another gender, but is not that gender. Omnigay, gender fluid with one's attraction to other genders changing. Orb gender, a gender which feels round without any edges. Paragender, feeling very near one gender and particularly something else. Pendogender, never being satisfied with your gender no matter how well it fits due to self-doubt. Paragender, identifying with a gender but not as that gender. Parogender, wanting to be a certain gender but not being of said gender. Persona gender, a term used to describe a gender which is as public as a social identity. Perospike, being usually content with your gender but occasionally strongly wanting to be another one. Pictogender, a gender that can only be defined with visual imagery or symbolism. Pixel gender, experiencing two genders with one as the smallest addressable element in the overall gender experience. Polygender, identifying as multiple genders. Polygender flux, fluctuating in intensity, multiple genders. Pregender, a godlike gender far outside beyond the normal cognizance of gender that is omnipresent, not null, but other and beyond mortality and time. Yeah, I was reading that straight up. That's exactly how it was put. Don't blame me for that. Perissogender, a gender which feels special and precious to you. Preterbinary, beyond the gender's binary spectrum of male and female, which I had not seen either of them on here. Prismus gender, having a gender which one feels is primary, strongest in identifying with. Privagender, a gender which is private. Proxver, masculine gender similar to boy, but on a separate plane. Quiver gender, having more than one gender whose intensity fluctuates. Quo-gender, feeling as if the concept of gender is in a... Dude, there are like 3 others like that. Salugender, a gender which imparts upon its owner a feeling of safety and comfort. Schrodegender, a gender which you can both feel and not feel. Oh, I thought that was going to be Matt Schroeder's gender. You know what? My gender is Matt Schroeder now, because obviously my gender could just be whatever the fuck I want to, because these are retarded. Scoragender, fluid or flux with 3 genders that are somewhat similar. Scorpifluid, a gender fluid between unknown genders. Scorpigender, a gender that is a mystery and very difficult to understand, like every other thing on this list. Sea gender, a gender that is deep and unknown as the ocean itself. Selenogender, a gender experience of fluidity in which the perception of your gender or even the foundation of gender itself shifts in a constant way. Damn, these genders are like the fucking Kuhl theory. Hey, remember when I read the Kuhl theory? Better than this. Sequigender, having a gender which one feels is second. Shell gender, a gender which is thin. Sky gender, a feeling of gender that varies in clarity. Spec gender, a gender defined by hope. Spike gender, a mostly unidentified gender with intense momentary spikes. Star gender, an otherworldly gender that is beyond comprehension in earthly terms. Static gender, a gender that can be described as TV static. Stratogender, a gender that has various layers. Subgender, mostly a gender with a bit of another gender. Subfluid, when one fluctuates between subgenders. Subgender, having a gender which is 100% one gender with more on top of that of other genders, because that makes sense. Syncogender, a gender that changes multiple times a day. System fluid, genders that change depending on who's fronting. System gender, a gender which is defined as the sum of all genders. Taken gender, a gender that changes quickly. Tangender, having a gender felt with the most certainty, but then as time flowing away. Teragender, when someone's gender stays the same for an extended amount of time due to the comfort they feel with that gender. Technogender, only comfortable with one's gender when using technology. Telegender, a gender one feels a disconnected distance from, almost to the point of not feeling it. Tempgender, a gender identity that feels temporary and is replaced often. Temporagender, a gender that is changed with seasons. Tenuder, a small, delicate, fragile gender. Tragender, not transgender, tragender, a gender that stretches over the whole spectrum of gender. Traumatgender, a gender identity that has been heavily influenced by past trauma. Trigender, identifying as 3 genders. Turbogender, a gender that you have tried to figure out but is too confusing. Vague fluid, a gender which is fluid but determining one's current gender is difficult. Vague flux, a gender which is fluid but determining on the intensity of one's gender is difficult. Vague gender, a gender being mostly or around a certain gender. Vapogender, a gender that sort of feels like smoke. Vector gender, when your gender is in the direction of something. Veloxigender, a fluid gender which moves too quickly for the owner to be able to identify. Vengender, when 2 genders overlap. Verangender, a gender that seems to change the moment it's identified. Vestigender, a gender that blankets another, stronger gender. Vibragender, a gender that is usually one but occasionally fluctuates. Videogender, a gender that feels too robotic to be classified as human. Vergender, when one is particularly genderless due to stress. Vosagender, a gender which feels weak and hollow. Void fluid, being genderful but none of the genders can clearly define. Witch gender, a gender that has closest or connection to witchcraft. Xenogender, a non-binary gender identity that cannot be contained by human understandings of gender. Zerl, someone who identifies in some way as a non-binary girl or non-binary girl adjacent. Zoe, the same with boy. Zumgender, never being satisfied with your gender. And Zodiagender, a catch-all gender term to be described as when one's gender is related to zodiac signs. Now this is retarded, and if you go by any of these genders, except for like the two that are fine, like if you want to be gender fluid or agender, I don't give a shit. But these things are fucking retarded, and if you actually think that most of these things are gender, you need mental help. Like, I need mental help, and I can tell you that. Bye.